Hi everyone, it's John from What Up and welcome back to another video. This is going to be another entry in my Explained series where I take certain elements of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series and talk about them. Today we're going to talk about the Seanchan. We're going to talk about their history, their culture, where they came from, what is going on, and who they are. Now they did show up very briefly in the very last episode of Season 1 of Sony and Amazon's The Wheel of Time show without a whole lot of explanation, and people have had questions. So I figured this would be a really good explained video to do. Now, if you're new to the channel and you don't know what I do here, I cover all things Wheel of Time, so if you like Wheel of Time content, make sure you click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Of course, since we are talking about elements of the book series long before they happen in the books, spoiler warning, we're talking about the Seanchan today. I will not give away any specific character arcs or plot points from the books. However, by watching this video, you're going to get information much quicker than you would if you read the books organically. Also, they haven't really shown up in the Sony and Amazon show yet, so if you haven't gone past the first season, be forewarned, I may ruin some things about the Seanchan in this video as well. All of that being said, let's get on to the video. Alright, so we're talking way back, about 1,000 years before the actual book series takes place, or the show takes place, and about 1,000 years after the Trolloc Wars, a gentleman by the name of Arthur Hawkwing decided he would consolidate the Westlands under his rule. He basically started out by defending his country and then just kept winning battles and folding other countries into his own. Now, by the end of it, he had the entire continent of the Westlands under his rule and was besieging Tar Valon because, let's face it, the Aes Sedai weren't going to bend under him like everyone else did. During that time frame, he sent his son Luther with a giant contingent of ships and a whole bunch of troops across the ocean to find new lands to conquer and bring under their rule. That's where the Seanchan come in. This fleet left and never came back. They were presumed lost, although Luther actually made it to a body of land and started conquering there. So as you can see here, the Westlands is on the right side of the map, and Luther sailed from there all the way to Seanchan. Now, a lot of the wikis and a lot of the other information we have from the book series say it's about a 5,000-mile journey, although this particular map that comes from the world of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time that released in 1995, well, it happens to show it being a lot longer of a journey. But either way, they had a long, treacherous journey before they landed at the continent of Seanchan. Once there, they pitted all of the nations against each other. Essentially, they made friends with one, and then they started attacking others. Then they started pitting other nations against one another and folding them in. While they were there, a woman, who was an Aes Sedai of the continent, decided that she would make something called an Adam. And now this Adam was a way to control women who could channel. They were a big problem for Luther and his armies. They used this to collar women who could channel and make them do their bidding. Now, of course, Damane Sedai, who was this woman, was also collared because Luther couldn't differentiate between her, his ally, and every other woman who could channel. Now, over about 800 years or so, they ended up consolidating all of these different countries into one solidified empire called the Seanchan. During consolidation, all the Shadowspawn were killed. So essentially, they do have a blight in Seanchan, they do have Shadowspawn, they had Trollocs and Fades and other Shadowspawn there, but Sheol Ghoul was in the Westlands, so there was no way to replenish everything they killed. So once they were gone, they were completely gone, never replenished, and faded into myth. So after consolidation, they became a very rigid society structured by class. Now, they were led by an emperor or an empress. You can tell who they are because they shaved their head and lacquered all of their fingernails. Below them were the High Blood. Now, this was the emperor or the empress's immediate family, and they shaved the sides of their head, leaving a fan of hair in the middle, and lacquered 1 or 2 nails in each hand. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. We have the Low Blood below them, which are basic general nobility. They have a bowl cut with a tail. They lacquered 1 or 2 fingernails in each hand. But before we get to the regular people in Seanchan, we have the Sojin. Now, the Sojin are slaves, but they're slaves in service to the royal family. So, essentially, while being slaves, they still had more freedoms and more rights than a lot of the free men and women within Seanchan, which is a little bit strange. But then we have the free men and women, that's basically your working class, everybody else in the actual continent. Below them are the Dakavale. Now, they are the slaves, so they could be regular nobility slaves, other people's slaves, and the Damane. Now, the Damane are even lower, really, than other Dakavales. So they're slaves, but they're not even really seen as people. Now, Damane are women who could channel that have been collared. They're basically seen as tools, and that's it. Sometimes maybe as a pet in some way, shape, or form, but less than a pet. They're not real people, they don't have any rights or freedoms, and they're not even considered worth people's time to look at. Now, because they were such a rigidly class-structured society, you couldn't speak to people who were far above or far below you in rank, because it would be seen as dishonorable. So essentially, if someone who was of high rank, either imperial family, like the high blood or the low blood, wanted to speak to a free person, they would have to use one of their slaves to do so. So they'd have to use a Decavale or a Sojin, and sometimes the imperial family would have Sojin called voices. Their whole job was to speak to people because no one was even close to the rank of the imperial family. Also, if you were lower in the rank structure than anyone else, you couldn't meet their eyes. And if you were higher, you couldn't meet other people's eyes either if they were lower than you, because it would be seen as dishonorable too. So very, very rigid, very class structured, and there's a whole lot of rules governing their society. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Seanchan military. Now, they were called the ever-victorious army for a reason. They essentially never lost a battle. At least, that was publicly recorded. During the consolidation, it was 800 years of constant warfare where they honed their battle skills, and they learned how to use not only battle tactics, but they tamed a lot of the beasts native to the Seanchan land and used them for warfare. Now, this gave them a distinct advantage in a number of different ways. The first of these beasts they used were the Reikin. Now, there are two types, the Reikin and the toe Reikin. Reikin are smaller, they're leathery, they're like big, giant flying lizards, and people would ride on them. Now, the riders, the Morat Reikin, were generally women. 3 out of every 4 were women, and they were fearless. They would hop on these beasts' back, and they would do 2 things. They would deliver messages to other battalions, and they would scout out enemy locations, which gave the Seanchan air superiority in a time when the rest of the world didn't have it. So when they come to the Westlands as part of the return, and they have Reikin with them, it gave them a very distinct advantage over their opponents. Now, the toe Reikin are a bit different. They're the same type of creature, only much larger. They're used for long-distance flights and for hauling cargo. We have the Grom. The Grom are sort of like cavalry. Think of them as a 4-legged giant lizard frog with really tough skin and 3 eyes. Now, they are absolutely fierce in battle. They bite and claw their opponents, and they make horses nervous. So they're really good against cavalry. Then we have the Seanchan. Now, the Seanchan are essentially elephants. They're used for 2 things, either as work animals or during battle, and they would absolutely frighten everyone they come up against. During the book series, they were called giant boar horses by Val and Luca because he didn't know their actual names, but either way, we would know them as elephants. All right, so the last thing that gave the Seanchan complete superiority in battle were the Damane and the Suledom. Basically, Damane are women who can channel who have been collared, and they're forced into servitude. So they're slaves, they're less than people. In the Seanchan Empire, women who can channel that are not collared are called Merit Damane, and they are frightening to everyone, including the Merit Damane themselves. Everyone is born and raised to be scared of these women and that they're not really people themselves. Now, once collared, they're controlled through a device called an Adam, which is a terre ingrielle used by Suledom. So the Suledom has a bracelet, the Damane has a collar, and the Suledom controls the Damane and basically makes her do what she wants. Now, they're used for a number of different reasons, but in battle, they use fire, earth, different elements of the one power to basically completely dominate their enemies, and they are not bound by the 3 oaths in any way, shape, or form, so they can do pretty much whatever they want. They're also used to find ore, for other bits of work, and for entertainment. They use something called skylights, which are essentially really cool versions of fireworks. The last thing I want to mention about the Seanchan military are the Death Watch Guards. There are 2 different types. They're the human Death Watch Guards, which are the elite of the Seanchan forces, and they're used to guard the imperial family, and the Gardeners. The Gardeners are Ogier Death Watch Guards. Every single Death Watch Guard is a Decavale, so they are a slave except for the Ogier. They are completely free, and they choose to protect the imperial family because they want to. And they are absolutely intense and fearless in battle. Now, one of the things I'm really excited for the show is to see the Gardeners, as they're called, actually unload on the people of the Westlands. I think that would be absolutely frightening to see. Now, these Death Watch Guards basically are raised from birth to give their life before those of the imperial family, and it is absolutely nothing to them to die in servitude and protecting their charges. All right, so that leads us to the end of the first season of the show, episode 8. Now, we do get to see the Seanchan just a little bit. We see all of their ships on the coastline, and these people here are the Forerunners. They're those who come before, and they're basically scouts. They're an expeditionary force sent by the Seanchan to scout out their fatherland to see if it was still intact, see if everyone still held to their oaths to Harther Hawkwing, or they would have to do something about it. Now, in the book series, they landed in Falme, and they essentially conquered that area until certain elements that happened at the end of the Great Hunt. Now, I won't get into that because I didn't give spoiler warnings, but basically, they're here to see what can be done about conquering the Westlands completely and bringing it back under their rule, because let's face it, they have an emperor and empress, and they need to expand their empire. All right, so now we're going to talk about show-related stuff. So if you haven't seen episode 8 of season 1 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time, specifically the last 2 minutes, be forewarned, I'm going to ruin that for you. So we're talking about the Seanchan. Give you folks a chance to dip out now. All right, I assume you're gone if you don't hear spoilers. So first we'll talk about the ships. These ships, when they're coming on screen here, very cool, very epic, very memorable. However, it's not exactly how I envisioned them in my head. They look a lot more Viking than perhaps I envisioned. Now that's just me, but the next thing I want to talk about here is these two gentlemen up top on the forecastle of the first ship we see. Now, I, at first glance, thought they were Death Watch guards because they looked so much bigger than everyone else, and I thought they must be gardeners. 100% were gardeners because they seemed to be bigger than everyone else on the screen with them. But upon consideration, the armor of Death Watch guards were deep, deep, deep green. So deep green, in fact, they were almost black. So unless they changed stylistically how the Death Watch guards looked completely, which, let's face it, is entirely possible. They've done that with quite a few other things for the book series to the show so far. They might just be maybe Sojin, maybe someone else. I have no idea, but they are really cool looking, and I do know that a lot of the armor in the book series is described as being bug-like, and we do definitely get bug-like vibes from the armor we see on these people on these ships. Now, this next shot shows the Damane in the very foreground, or I guess the background of this picture facing towards the land, and the Suledom closer to us. And there's a little bit of a change here. So in the book series, the Suledom have a silver bracelet that's connected by a silver leash to a silver collar on the Damane. And that's how they control them. They basically can feed them, warm thoughts, bad thoughts, make them hurt, feel cold, heat, make them feel pain, all kinds of different things. Plus, that's how they control how they can channel. They seem to change that for the show. Now, I'm not upset about this in any way, shape, or form. I think that you can get people around in leashes like a dog, probably wouldn't look so good on screen, probably wouldn't translate really well. So it appears to be that they've changed it, that they have gold bracelets on the Suledom instead. You see the Suledom making the movements here, and then the Damane in front, and they seem to have gold neck bands around their necks. So it's still a bracelet and a collar, but not connected by a chain where they'd be leading them around like a pet. So my guess is they decided to go with that kind of stylistic choice just because it looked a little bit better on the screen. Now, the other thing here is they seem to have giant gold. A lot of people call them soothers, but I think they're there just so they won't talk. In the book series, Damane were allowed to talk. In fact, they were asked questions quite often, and that's how they were trained, given treats if they said the right things. Maybe they're going for something a little more dehumanizing for the show. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, this is our very first look at the Suledom in the background here and the Damane in the front. And I'm very excited to see the Seanchan portrayed on screen for Season 2. We do know that they are a bigger part of Season 2 and Season 3 than they were in Season 1, obviously. So, that's the end of my explain video for the Seanchan. I hope you folks enjoyed it. I had a good time making this. I love the explain videos. They're a lot of fun. A lot of work, but they're a lot of fun. So, in the comments down below, let me know what you thought of this video, if there's anything I do to improve on it in the future, and what other explaining videos you would like to see. Now, it's been a very, very long time since I've done one, so this one is probably a little bit higher quality than some of my older explain videos, but the information is still good in those if you want to go back and watch those if you have any questions about certain things relating to the book series, and perhaps something might translate to the show. All right, thank you all so very much for sticking with me here to the very end. Here's to many more.